Hello, this is John T. Rhapsodes Esquire, purveyor of awesome old-school audio stories, bringing you another funny one from George Washington Harris, featuring his crazy-like-a-fox Tennessee mountain man character, Sut Lovingood. George Harris walked the earth from 1814 to 1869, mostly in East Tennessee. Today's story is called Sut's New-Fangled Shirt and was published in an 1867 collection of 24 Sut Lovingood stories titled Sut Lovingood, Yarn Spun by a Natural Born Durn'd Fool. Regarding the core problem arising in this story, I think Sut should have just gotten the shirt wet again. See if you agree. Hear the words of old. Sut's New-Fangled Shirt by George W. Harris, published in 1867. I met Sut one morning, weaving along in his usual rambling, uncertain gait. His appearance satisfied me at once that something was wrong. He had been sick, whipped in a free fight, or was just getting on his legs again from a big drunk. But upon this point, I was soon enlightened. "Why, Sut," I said, "what's wrong now? You look sick." "Heaps wrong, George," Sut said. "Durn my skin if I ain't most dead, and my looks don't lie when they hints that I'm sick. And I am sick. I'm skinned." "Well, who skinned you?" I asked. "Old Bullin?" "No, hoss," Sut said. "A durneder fool than Bullin did it. I just skinned myself." "Well, what in the name of common sense did you do it for?" I asked. "Didn't do it in the name of common sense," Sut said. "Did it in the name and with the spirit of plumb natural born durned fool. Get down from that horse, George, and take a swig. I wants two of 'em myself," shaking his constant companion, a whiskey flask, at me. "And plant yourself onto that there log, and I'll tell you the story if I can. I am a durneder fool than anyone outside an asylum or Congress, 'ceptin' my own daddy, for he acted like a horse and I ain't tried that yet. I'm allers into some trap that wouldn't catch a sage-field sheep. I'll drown myself someday, just see if I don't. I specs that would stop the family disposition to act dern fool, so far as Sut's concerned." "Well, how did it happen, Sut?" I asked. "Have you been beat playing cards or drinking?" "Nary a one, by Jiminy," said Sut. "Them jobs can't be did in these here parts, as anybody knows. But seeing it's you, I'll tell you the story. I am sick, shamed, sorry, sore, and mad to kill, I am. You know I boards with Bill Carr at his cabin on the mountain, and pays for such as I gets when I have money. And when I ain't got any money, why he takes 1/3 out of me in wholesome hot cussin', and his wife Betts takes the other 2/3 out with the battling stick and the interest with her sharp tongue, and she takes more interest than principal. Betts is the cussedest woman I ever seed anyhow, for jaw, breedin', and pride. She could scold a blister right plumb onto a bull's curl in 2 minutes. She patterns herself after all the newfangled fashions she hears tell on, you know, from bustles to breeches. Oh, she's one of 'em, and sometimes she's 2 or 3, she is." "Well," Sut continued, "you see, I'd got hold of some homemade cotton cloth for a shirt and coaxed Betts to make it. And about the time it were done, here come a cussed stuck-up lawyer named Johnson and asked for breakfast. Right then I wished the bread had been arsenic and the meat strychnine, and that he'd have stayed and took dinner too. Durn his Sasharer Mitimer's old soul to thunder. I wonder it didn't work him powerful, as it were, for Betts cooks up some terrifying mixtures of victuals when she tries herself. I'm proof myself. For $30, I just let a sluice of aqua fortis run through me for half a day, and then lived to spend the last darn cent for churn-brain whiskey. If I didn't, holding up his flask and peeping through it, I'd done been dead long ago. Well, continued Sut, while Lawyer Johnson were eating his breakfast, Betts spied out that his shirt were monstrous stiff, and it was slick as glass. So she never rested until she wormed it out of him that it were done with a flour starch preparation. Betts went with them a piece of the way down the mountain to get the particulars, and when she come back, she said she had 'em. I thought she had myself. She immediately set to boiling a big pot of starch paste, nigh onto a peck of it, and told me I were going to have the purtiest shirt in that mountain range. Well, she were sort of right, for when I last seed it, it were purty. Yes, awful purty, to a rat, or a buzzard, or any other varmint fond of dirty, scary-looking things. But from the time I stayed inside of it, I can't say it was a human shirt I'd give a dern for a dozen of 'em. Honest purty shirt, Betts says to me, the cussed old hen jaybird. I just wish she had to wear it, with a red pepper lining. She threw my shirt into the pot and soaked it there until it took up most of the starch paste. Then she took it and ironed it out flat and dry and sat it on its edge against the cabin in the sun. There it stood like a dry horsehide, and it rattled like onto a sheet of iron, it did, pasted together all over. Honest purty shirt, she says. Durned fool. When I came to dinner, Sut continued, nothing would do, Betts, but I must put myself inside that shirt right then and there. She parted the tails a little piece with a case pocket knife, and after I got my head started up into it, she'd pull down, first at one tail and then the other, till I were fairly inside of it and buttoned too. Darn the everlasting infernal new-fangled sheet iron cuss of a shirt, I say. I felt like I'd crawled into an old bee gum, and it all full of ants too. But it were a born-to-twin of Lawyer Johnson's shirt, Betts said, and I felt like standing as much personal discomfort as he could, just to get to sample after somebody human. It even made me think it had the virtue of making a lawyer out of me until it got limber. I set into building an ash hopper for Betts, and worked powerful hard, sweat like a horse, and then the shirt quit its hurting and took to feeling slippery. Thinks I, that's sort of lawyer-like anyhow, and I were hoped up about that shirt and what might come out of it. After I got done working, I took me a 4-finger dose of bumblebee whiskey, went up into the loft, and fell asleep a-thinking about being a real lawyer, horse, saddlebags, and books. And Betts went over the top of the mountain to see her mama. Well, after a while I waked up. I'd just been dreaming that the judge of the Supreme Court had me sewed up in a rawhide and sat up again a hot pottery kiln to dry, and the drying woke me. I now thought I were dead, and had died of rheumatics of the hurtin'est kind. All the joints I could move were my ankles, knees, and wrists. Couldn't even move my head, and scarcely wink my eyes. The cussed shirt were pasted fast onto me all over, from the ends of the tails to the points of the broad-axe collar over my ears. That shirt sat to me as close as a poor cow does to her hide in March. I wormed and strained and cussed and grunted till I got it sort of broke at the shoulders and elbows, and then I done the darndest fool thing I ever did in these here mountains. I shuffled and tore my britches off and skinned loose from my hide about 2 inches of the tail, all round in awful pain and quick stinging tribulation. Oh, great golly grampus, how it hurt, Sut said. Then I took up a plank out of the loft and hung my legs down through the hole where the ladder came down, sat on the plank, and nailed the edge of the front tail of the shirt to the loft floor in front of me, and the hind tail I nailed to the plank that I sat on. I flung the hammer out of my reach to keep my heart from failing me, unbuttoned the collar and wristbands, raised my hands way above my head, shot up my eyes, said a short prayer, and jumped through the loft opening to the ground floor, just 13 foot and 1 inch clear of the joists. Here, Sut remarked, sadly shaking his head, George, I'm a durneder fool than my daddy, horse, hornets, and gophers. I'll have to drown myself one of these days. See if I don't. Well, I said, go on, Sut. Did the shirt come off? I think it did, said Sut, looking all around at his body. I heard a noise like tearing a shingle roof off of a house, and felt like my bones were all that left the shirt when I reached the floor. I staggered to my feet and took a mournful look up at that shirt. The nails had held the shirt to the planks. There it were, hanging arms down, inside out, and just as stiff as ever. It looked like a map of Mexico after one of the worst battles. Inside the shirt, I saw a patch of my skin about the size of $1, or $1.50 stuck to it. A bunch of hair about like a bird's nest there, and then some more skin, and then some starch paste, then a little more hair, and then a heap of skin, hair and skin straight along all over that new-fangled, everlasting, infernal starch-pasted cuss of a durned shirt. It were a picture to look at, and so was I. The hide, hair, and starch paste were about equally divided atwixt me and it. George, listen to me, Sut continued. It looked exactly like the skin of some wild beast tore off alive, or a bag that had toted a leg of fresh beef from a shooting match. Well, directly Bill came home with Betts, and was the first to enter the boarding house cabin. He backed outside again and says, Merciful pay print, there's been a murdering done here. It's been old Bullen. He skinned Sut, and there's his hide hung up to dry. Well, Betts walked around the shirt examining it, till at last she ventured close and knowed it was her sewing. Says she, You dad-dratted old washpot head, that's his Sunday shirt. He's had a dreadful fight through with somebody. They sure did go for his hair. They sure did, said Bill. And if I'd been Sut, says Betts, I'd have shed that shirt. I wouldn't have fought such a nasty fight if that were my finest shirt, would you, Bill? Now, George, Sut continued, I'm bound to put up Lawyer Johnson's meat for him on sight, without regarding good killing weather. And if ever a woman flattens out a shirt for me again, durn my everlasting picture if I don't flatten her out, as thin as a stepchild's bread and butter. I'll do it if it takes me a week. It'll be a retribution, the biggest kind of a preacher's retribution that is to be found in the Holy Book. Do you remember my daddy with some hornets that chased him into the creek when he was acting horse? Well, this is what come of it. I'll drown myself, see if I don't. That is, if I don't die from that hell-fired shirt. Now, George, Sut continued, if a big red-headed woman with big feet asks you to marry her, you may do it. If a woman wants you to kill her husband, you may do that. If a gal asks you to rob a bank and take her to California, you may do that. If one of them wants you to quit whiskey, you might even do that. But if ever a woman, old or young, purty as a sunflower or ugly as a skinned horse, offers you a shirt anointed with starch paste to put on, just you stop her in her tracks and burn that cussed shirt right there. You got it? And that concludes the reading of George Washington Harris's 1867 Sut Lovingood story called Sut's New-Fangled Shirt. By the way, do you agree that Sut's problem could have been solved if he had just gotten the shirt wet again? This is John Rhapsodes. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this story and would like to hear more, please subscribe, like, share, comment, and click the notification bell to help this YouTube channel grow. And remember, hear the words of old.